It's Michelle. Welcome back to Michelle's Life. Today I wanted to do another tag video. I really enjoy doing them, so I looked for one to do, and I wanted to do the time and place tag, which was originally created by Jen Campbell. I'll leave her link down below. And let's just get into it. I wanted to start with the books that I don't physically own. I have the pictures on my phone like I did in my last video, so I'll do it that way. So the first book I want to talk about is The City of Bones. I did not finish the whole series, and I know it's very popular, so it's probably like taboo that I didn't finish it, but I didn't. Anyway, I had been reading them or listening to them on audiobook with my friend Nikki, and we've been borrowing them from the library, and I remember when the movie came out, so it's mostly about the movie. I drove 3 hours to Orlando to go see it with her, and it was just a great time. Obviously the movie wasn't that great, but that's what I think of whenever I see the book, is reading them with her and talking to her about the books. And I guess she was kind of like my first book buddy, so that's what I think of. The next one is Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. I read this in college, and we were taught that it was a result of the book Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. And this was from the other perspective, from an African man, and it was just an amazing story. It was so much better than Heart of Darkness. And whenever I see this book, which I own it, it's just in storage in the garage in a tub, and so I thought it'd be easier to just find a picture. But whenever I see this book, I think of my favorite paper that I wrote while I was in college. It was fun because we were taught deconstruction in that class and how to take apart things, and I understand that's not many readers like to do that, and I don't normally, but this teacher was very strict about like breaking down how many words were in each line and how many lines are in each paragraph and just stuff like that. But what he didn't notice was at the end of the book, I guess it's pretty much a spoiler, but somebody dies there, hanged, and as the person who's being hanged is narrating, the lines are getting smaller and smaller and smaller as his breath is leaving his body. And I wrote my whole paper on that, and it was really cool, and it was a really proud moment for me. Anyway, the next is 1,000 Pieces of You. This reminds me of when I first had my daughter. It's probably TMI, but I was breastfeeding, and she was having a hard time with it, so I was waking up every 2 to 3 hours throughout the night to pump, to make milk for her, and I was playing on my phone, and it was just so boring, and my husband bought me a Kindle, and this is the first book that I've read on my Kindle, and ever since I've been addicted to reading again, especially ebooks, so that's what this book reminds me of. Let's see, next we go on to real books that I own. Next we have Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close by Jonathan Safran Foer. I bought 2 of his books one week when I went to Barnes & Noble. You can tell it's kind of old, it's yellow, plus my mom was a smoker, so. Anyway, I also bought Everything's Illuminated, and I was staying at my friend Bobby's house because things weren't so good at my house, that I'll get to later with the other books, and his dog ate the other book, so I wound up only reading this one. I never actually wound up reading Everything's Illuminated, but this book always reminds me of staying at his house and the fun times that we had, so with his mom. Next I have Divergent. I think it was like junior year in college. I wasn't reading too much YA, and my friend Mark asked us to like kind of start a little YA book club because he also liked reading YA. So we picked up Divergent, and the people in this book club were me, my husband, and Mark. But we all enjoyed this book, and then we read Insurgent together. I read half of Allegiant, but we didn't read that together. But anyway, when I see this book, it reminds me of my friend Mark, and that makes me happy. So next I have Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. This reminds me of high school again. It reminds me of my friend Bobby. His sister was going through a hard time, and it's not my place to really talk about it, but she was staying somewhere else, and I lent her my book and she had to put her name on it. So it's a very vivid reminder that, well, I can say that I was staying in her room while I was staying at Bobby's because she wasn't there. So, but she was really sweet to me, and she always treated me like family even though I was in her room. And when she came back, she always treated me like a sister, and this is just a reminder that I may not have a biological sister, but Liz is definitely my sister. So there's that. And then we have another book club I started when we moved to Arkansas. I was really lonely, so I created an Air Force young adult book club on base, and I had my first meeting at my house and we read The Maze Runner. But that kind of reminds me of the book club, but In the Shadow of Blackbirds will always remind me of my friendship with Jody. She recommended this book, and the whole book club loved this book, and it was just nothing like anything I'd ever read before. So whenever I look at this, I think of her, and how, I don't know, I thought it was pretty brave to start my own book club. But anyway, I also have What Dreams May Come by Richard Matheson. My friend Johnny gave me this book, and I also think of the first place I ever lived on my own where I actually paid rent was in this really crappy house over in the ghetto. I lived with Bobby and my friend Jesse, and What Dreams May Come was one of his favorite movies, and I remember watching it, and Jesse's like, he's a, you know, tiny guy, but he's also very walled. You know, like, you never see too much emotion come out of him, but you could see when he was watching this movie, you saw those walls come down, and that's what this book always reminds me of. It reminds me of my friend Jessie living in that dump of a house and the good times that we had. So, and then last but not least, I have Dry. But before I want to get into this, I want to warn you that this book, there's a lot of memories associated with it, and it does get really personal, so if you don't want to know that much about me, you can just stop watching because it's about to get real. Where do we start? Dry is a memoir from Augustine Burroughs. It's kind of like the sequel to Running with Scissors, but it's a lot more, it takes a dark turn in this book, and I don't want to really spoil anything, but one of the characters in this book winds up smoking crack cocaine, and he goes into like the details of how one, I know this sounds really stupid, but I'll explain how one goes about smoking crack cocaine, like the tools used and the different pipes and what they look like and stuff like that. And I had received this book, I think for my birthday, from an ex-boyfriend who was a boyfriend. He was my boyfriend at the time. And I waited a while to read it, and I was already living at my friend Bobby's house, and I remember getting to that part of the description and it all clicked together. My whole life clicked together. The reason why I was living at my friend Bobby's house was because my mom was a drug addict. I didn't know what kind of drugs she was doing. All I know is that because of them, she was unable to hold a job. She became agoraphobic. We had strange people coming into our house at 3 o'clock in the morning. I was very scared, and that's why I moved out. So, but I always naively assumed that it was marijuana, and a lot of my friends didn't take me seriously because they were like, so what, your mom smokes pot. But it wasn't pot, because when I was a little girl, I found these instruments hiding in her bed, the ones that were talked about in this book, and it all clicked in that moment. And I remember just reading this at the desk, at Liz's desk in her room, and crying and calling my ex-boyfriend and thanking him for this book. And I didn't even explain to him why I was crying or calling him, or like, probably to this day thinks I'm insane. But I wound up taking the public bus back to my mom's house and yelling at her, and we got into a huge argument, and she said that I always just assumed that it was marijuana and not something else, and that was my fault, not hers. And it was just a very ugly time in my life. And in 2013, She died from COPD supposedly, but also from a cocaine overdose. So whenever I see this book, I think of that, and it's kind of hard, but I hold on to it. The second memory is connected to Augustin Burroughs himself. In one of my previous videos I talked about going to the Sanibel Island Writers Conference, and he was the keynote speaker one year, and I was so excited because here he was, like, I feel that he changed my life, and I couldn't wait to meet him. And I had told the teacher of that class, I had emailed him and told him my story and told him how excited I was to meet Augustin Burroughs. And I walk into the keynote speech and I sit down and I'm so excited, and he comes out on stage and he was coming out with a new book, and he starts off with saying, "I have people come up to me all the time telling me how I changed their lives, so I figured I would write a book about how awesome I am." And the whole speech went on that way. And I understand that Running with Scissors is a coming out story, and I understand that it helped people embrace who they were, but that's not what it was for me. And even if it were, to go and brag about it, like, he was just a real ass. He was an ass. So I remember leaving that night and just driving home and crying because I was so excited. Like, this man changed my whole life. Like, yes, I had already run away from home, and yes, I probably would have learned about my mom's addiction a different way, but he just, it was ruined. So I will never read another book by Augustin Burroughs, but I do still have these two. So that's this tag. Sorry it took a downward spiral there, but and it wasn't 10 books, but I just really wanted to do this tag. I haven't really told many people about that book and what it means to me, so I figured I would tell you. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you've done this video, leave a link in my comments. I would love to see it. My throat's so dry, sorry. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.